All right, folks. Welcome everybody once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Greg Flamong and Jamie Uyeyama. We're going to talk some Irish football. Before we do, we wanted to mention once again, if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, go to the front page, click on the premium section, and sign up today. Lots going on with recruiting and, of course, portal. And hey, they're in the playoff, and so we're going to be talking about that as well today. Also, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can also follow Power Hour and watch the live version of Power Hour on YouTube. You can go to YouTube, search for Irish Sports Daily, click the subscribe button, and also like the video. That helps us a lot, and it'll alert you the next time we are on as far as the broadcasts go. So, also, Greg, you want to introduce our sponsor here?
Yes, of course. We're always brought to you by ESQ Clothing, and the secret ESQ ISD sale lives on until Wednesday, and that is use code ISD to get 27% off all online items. So everything that's online, you see, it's not eligible for gift cards. All your favorite players and coaches are wearing ESQ Clothing, their bamboo dress shirts, their sport coats, bomber jackets, all those things. Head over to ESQ Clothing, use code ISD for 27% off. That goes until January 1st. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Notre Dame wins this game, however many points they score, the sale, I guarantee you, will continue because that's the way God rolls. So you're going to want to head over to esqclothing.com, upgrade your wardrobe today. Hopefully you took advantage of the sale for Christmas and Black Friday and all those other things. Continue to take advantage while Notre Dame is still in the playoffs and on the march to the national championship. esqclothing.com. Code ISD 27% off.
Greg, look at Yama, man. He looks grumpy again today. Were you on the
No,
naughty list?
I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to roll.
You look like you got coal in
Focused.
your stocking. All right, okay.
I'm focused.
He's focused. All right, here we go. All right, folks, we're going to get into the game, and this is, I think, one of the biggest games in Notre Dame history. And I say that every time they play one of these kind of blue blood programs, but when you're trying to turn the corner, guys, this is the type of game you want to win. And yes, I know that they'll be saying, oh gosh, if Notre Dame were to win, well, they didn't have their starting quarterback, and there'll be a bunch of other excuses. But this is the type of game that moves the needle more so than beating Indiana. I mean, you beat a blue blood team like this, and this is where things really start to turn for your program. So I can't stress enough. I really think that this is a big, important game for Notre Dame and the future of their program. Certainly, the program's not over if they lose, but I think if they do win, there's a great opportunity for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman to advance this program. So excited about that. Let's get into the matchup, and I've kind of broken it down to a lot of different looks and things that are going to be factors in this game. And let's start with Georgia's run game versus Notre Dame's rush defense. Notre Dame's going to be missing Riley Mills. I don't think that run defense was necessarily his specialty, but still a pretty solid player against the run. How do you see this matchup? I guess, who do you think has the advantage in this situation? Let's start with you, Yama.
I mean, obviously, you lose Riley Mills against their interior three, which I think are really, really good players like Ratledge, Fairchild, Wilson. That's the strength of their offensive line. Those are three NFL guys. They're all good. Those are the best three players on their line. So you take out one of Notre Dame's NFL guys, that's going to be a matchup to watch. Obviously, I think Gabriel Rubio has been really, really good against the run. Not just this year, last year too. So that's not the thing that you worry about as much. He doesn't offer anything close to what Mills offers as a pass rusher. So just as as a complete thing, he hasn't been able to do that yet. So I think that's, something that people should kind of keep in mind, that's more of where the drop off is, but also the fact that Notre Dame is obviously very thin at that position where you're going to have to, Rubio's going to play more plays in this game than he's played his entire career in this game, specifically because if you look at how they had paired those defensive tackles together, when they kind of were doing the rotations, they would put Heinisch with Mills, and they put Rubio with Cross. Well, now, I mean, how many times I'm sure they're going to have to play Heinisch and Cross together at some point, but you're minus a lot of beef in there when you're doing that. So we'll see if, like, a Seviano or a Mukum gets, I don't know, 5 plays or whatever in the game. But that's obviously going to be something to watch in the game. But I think really, like, one of the things that I expect Notre Dame to do, regardless if those guys are in or not, whatever's going on, they're going to do a lot of movement up front. They're going to do a lot of stuff to kind of try to mess with what Georgia does in the run game to try to blow things up. They're going to not because if they play straight up, they'll lose. But that's not how Notre Dame plays anyways. They're not going to do that. They're going to run blitz a lot. A lot is going to depend on how, similar to what they happened with Indiana, Notre Dame's DBs fantastic with their run fits. Just awesome. Playing downhill. They were a big part of stopping the run against Indiana, and they're going to have to be a huge part in this game too.
Greg, what do you think are the key matchups here defensively for Notre Dame against their run? Who are some of the guys that you think got to have a big game in this if Notre Dame's going to stop Georgia's rushing attack?
Well, I think Jamie laid it out right. Like, so the linebackers are obviously going to be key, right? And I think Jalen Snead's been playing a lot more snaps. He tied for the team lead in snaps with Jack Kaiser. We don't think KVA is going to be ready to go. Matt was able to observe him yesterday in practice, and he was doing some drills, but not all the drills. And, like, if you're 3 days out or whatever it is, and you're not doing all the Indy stuff, you're probably not going to go, especially when it'd be one thing if he was playing in games and they were nursing him through Indy, but he hasn't been playing in games. So, like, unless you're doing that stuff, you're not going to go. So, like, Jalen Snead's going to have a big role in this game, right? And he's been playing a lot better. Like, this is a really big game for him. You have to be assignment sound in these games. And he's been much better in that area. And that's, I think, allowed him to get on the field. So I think Notre Dame's linebackers, like Jamie said, Al Golden this is not his first day. This is not the first time he's ever had a matchup where maybe up front they're a little overmatched in terms of size and in terms of experience and ability. He's going to have a plan for them, right? So to me, it's just a matter of, like, the plan that he come up with. Can Notre Dame win early? Can they kind of stifle Georgia's running game early on in the game? Can Notre Dame get up in the game? I think that's another big part of it. It's like, if Georgia is able to lean on them and lean on them and lean on them as the game goes on, that's when you could see something like Ohio State in 2022, where it's like they didn't run the ball great, but in that fourth quarter, they really started to lean on Notre Dame. And then it became, kind of a decisive thing in that game. It's like Notre Dame, they do need to play up from up front in this game so that Georgia can't really do that. But I put up Georgia's numbers here. They just haven't been a great running team, like, just throughout the year, right? Like, you have one game over 200 yards. That was against UMass. Against Texas, it was a comparable defense to Notre Dame. They ran for 3.6 and 3.8 yards per carry in those games. Can Gunnar Stockton help them in this area? Like, again, it's like I said it on the last Hit and Hustle show. It's good for them that Riley Mills is out of this game because they need to be able to run the ball in this game. And so him being out helps Georgia do the thing that they need to do to win. But it's like Michael Hahn's been bringing up, like, in game 14, are they really going to break out and be a great running team in this game? Trevor Etienne is healthier now, right? He's been hurt for a little bit. They've relied on the freshman Nate Frazier, the running back. So they've kind of relied on him a lot more than they probably want. Trevor Etienne, I believe he's, a lot healthier than he has been. He ran well in the SEC title game. So that's kind of the thing, right? Like, can Notre Dame keep Georgia down to the running attack they've been throughout the year? If they can, you kind of got to like Notre Dame's chances.
All right, Yama, so what about Georgia's passing game versus Notre Dame's pass defense? And do you think Notre Dame can get pressure on Stockton? Do you think they'll be able to generate the kind of pressure that they've been able to do pretty much every game this year and affect the quarterback play? So let's talk about the pass game. Do you think they'll be successful here? And then also Notre Dame's pass rush.
Yeah, I hate the matchup for Georgia. I really think that they haven't even with Carson Beck. Their pass offense has had issues all year. Their receivers, they don't have a McConkey, a Lad McConkey was a first round pick, a Brock Bowers, another first round pick. Losing those guys, it's a totally different offense now. They don't have those. They don't have those one. They don't have not just two dominating guys. They don't have one, and that has made a huge difference with them. They don't have those guys. They don't have anyone who's like super dynamic and dominant. Like they don't have any of those guys. And typically, when you don't have that, they get a lot of contributions from everyone. It's not like they don't have talent. They got athletes across the board, but there's obviously a big difference between that. And I wouldn't say like, I think we always bring it up. I think people saw who watched the Texas A&M bowl game against USC. USC, even with those guys that left, they're still just incredibly talented at wide receiver, as talented as anyone in the country at wide receiver. Georgia doesn't have those same guys, and they're tied for the lead, or no, I believe they have the lead in Power 4 in terms of drops from the wide receiver position. They had 30 drops this year. I don't see that changing with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. The other thing is that with Gunnar Stockton, how they chose to kind of play with him, 3.3 average depth of target in the SEC championship game. They protected him big time. They did not throw the ball down the field. Not to say that he can't do it. I think certainly he's capable of doing it, but they played like that for a reason. They wanted to play safe. And I think if they, like kind of Greg said, they want to be able to run the football. They want to be able to throw screens. Eight of his passes were behind the line of scrimmage. Like they're going to want to try to do that. And if they're not having success doing that and moving the football and having success that way, then he's going to have to throw the ball down the field. If Notre Dame gets them into like third and long situations, I think that's the main thing too, is that Notre Dame get into third down. Notre Dame can create pressure based on what they do with, their pass, their pass rush plan that they always kind of put in place. They do a really great job with that. Al Washington does a great job with that. Golden does a great job with that. And they're really, really good there. And at the Georgia's offensive tackles, bad this year. Your guy, Monroe Freeling, like he's been bad for them. He has not, I mean, as much as like, we would love to say like, he would have been a guy. Imagine if Notre Dame got Monroe Freeling. He's really struggled this year. He's been kind of in and out. They've been switching with Ernest Green, who was a starter last year. He wasn't great last year. He's been worse this year. So they've been kind of playing guys that have pulled them out. Right tackle Xavier Truss, he's kind of more of a guard, but they have to play him at tackle. So they don't have good offensive tackles. I think if this game was obviously a game where you had Botello and Boubacar and, you'd think, oh man, like Notre Dame would really eat in this game. But still, even without that, because of what Notre Dame does with some of their stunts and all that kind of stuff, I still see them getting pressure. Stockton was sacked on 33.3% of the pressures that he took too. So I really don't like their, them in protection and obvious pass situations against Notre Dame's defense. I don't like them. I don't like their receivers winning in man consistently. I just don't see it. It's not to say they won't get some plays. I'm sure they will get something, but they have one receiver on the team who is above 50% on contested catch opportunities. And you look at where those guys are in their terms of how they win contested catch opportunities in man coverage, bad, like really bad. So what does Notre Dame play? A ton of man coverage. So they're going to have to scheme stuff up, and maybe, that will get things open. They run a lot of like those bunch, stack release kind of stuff to kind of get things open. If Notre Dame handles that well, it's going to be bad for Georgia. So Georgia really, really needs to run the football well in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it boils down to what we talked about: secondary tackling well. They have to tackle well for kind of those outside throws that you're going to see in the flat, that type of thing, the screen game. Um, the thing that I think that what you're going to see from Georgia is kind of what you saw from Notre Dame at the beginning of the year. They're not going to be able to press the ball down the field consistently. And so, just what a lot of teams did to Notre Dame, which was stack the line of scrimmage, try and play, within 10 yards, and because they know that Notre Dame didn't have the ability to threaten them down the field, you'll see Notre Dame play very, very similar in that regard, I think. And look, I think Gunnar Stockton's going to be a good quarterback. And I find it funny because everybody's like, well, a lot of the Georgia, well, this guy's a better player than. Well, if he was a better player, he'd be playing. I mean, it's just, I mean, come on, it just that he would. I mean, there's no reason not to play him, and especially if you've lost a few games. And so, do I think he could be a better player down the road? Of course, but it's kind of like, if you take Riley Leonard out and you put Angeli in, there's some drop off. There's definitely going to be some drop off, and I'm not sure that this is a team that can afford the drop off because, again, they don't have the ability, to kind of stretch the field. Like a guy like Aaron Smith, a guy who's got a lot of talent but can't catch football to save his life. I mean, he just cannot catch the football. And so you look at the way they play the game, and I think that this is a SEC team that Notre Dame can play with defensively, because I don't think that they have the kind of playmakers that some of these other teams do. They don't have the playmakers that even Texas has, and Texas has some pretty good receivers, some pretty good backs. I think that Georgia is, I'm surprised Texas lost to them, to be honest with you. But I think Quinn Ewers is part of the problem there as well. So, all right. So Al Golden, I mean, Greg, this is certainly kind of his thing. I think affecting quarterbacks. Do you think Golden will have the plan that he needs to be successful and slow down and maybe even stop this Georgia offense?
Yeah, I mean, this is what he does, right? He causes problems for quarterbacks. He's been doing it for the last 2 years, right? I mean, if you can do it to Caleb Williams, you can do it to anybody. The thing about Gunnar Stockton is, fans can say they like him better or whatever. They don't throw the ball with him. So, like, if they thought he was whatever, like if they thought he was better than Beck or he had the same ability as Beck or whatever, then his passing chart would look different than it does, right? Like, they've only thrown the ball 4 times over 20 yards with him. Like, and look, sometimes you come in the game and it's a blowout or whatever, and I understand that part. But, like, they didn't try to push the ball against Texas. The one time they did, he threw it to the defense in a really bad pass that he tried to cost them a game, and they just, they couldn't convert on the interception return. But they played it like they didn't think he was ready to, be like a guy you're going to count on third down, right? And so the other part to this is I think that Notre Dame against like Indiana and against even USC, right? Like 3rd and long is a viable down for those teams. I don't know that it's a viable down for Georgia. Like, Notre Dame can end drives on 1st and 2nd down in this game, right? If it's anything over like 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, Georgia's going to have to do something that they don't really want to do. Like, I don't know that they want Gunnar Stockton to sit back there and throw, to read the defense, right? Like, Notre Dame's got to, I think they're going to have to spy him, just because I think that's the best way for them to convert on 3rd down is for him to break the pocket and kind of run around. The other part is, like, I think the backs out of the backfield on those downs are going to be important because, like, he's going to be looking for those check downs. You got to be able to come up and tackle. You got to keep an eye on those guys. The other part is the tight ends. Like Oscar Delp, he was very key player for them once he came into the Texas game. So that's going to be another one. But like, the last thing that Georgia wants is for him to be standing back there and trying to read things, right? Xavier Watts is lurking. Adon Schuler is lurking. I'm kind of curious about this, Jamie. I guess for both of you too. When I think about this, I know that Christian Gray has, he had a tough game against USC. He gave up 3 catches. Like, one of those was kind of garbage time-ish against Indiana. I do think, though, that Georgia's looking at that defense and saying, we got to take shots against him. And if I was them, I would like to match up Arian Smith deep against Christian Gray to the field. They do have to complete it. He does have to catch it, right? But I think that's going to be something that they try to do. That's kind of an X factor in this game where it's like, if they hit a couple with him, that could kind of change the game a little bit. That's kind of something I've been thinking for the last, few days, I guess. I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on that.
The guy's got the ability to make plays. There's no doubt about it. He's just been highly, highly inconsistent, especially, deep balls, 50-50 type situations. I mean, even just regular balls, he drops a number. But it's just one of those guys who has the ability to stretch the defense, but you still have to be able to catch the football. And I think that I'm sure they're going to try and come after that. I think Christian Gray showed a few weaknesses in his game, but these guys have been able to bounce back after having some struggling games as well. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that's something they're going to try. It's just a matter of will Notre Dame be able to put pressure on this team and in those situations, and that's going to be, I think, a big factor in this. If you can kind of condense and collapse the pocket, I don't think Stockton's going to be a very effective passer. If you can let him kind of get outside and create and make some plays and put some pressure on the defense, then they may have a chance to do some things. But I really think just kind of enclosing that pocket, making him a pocket passer is what Notre Dame needs to do defensively when they're trying to throw the football. Thoughts here, Uyeyama?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely what they got to do. The key is going to be getting them into as many long yardage things as possible. And that's really kind of been the key for Notre Dame all year, really, is that, teams have some running success against Notre Dame, but usually what happens is that no one runs the football on them and drives it and just does it, because what Notre Dame eventually does is they get negative plays against you. And then once you get behind the sticks, it's hard to recover from against their defense. That's just, as soon as that happens, it's just, that's why too, as soon as when you get into plus territory, they've been just so good, because eventually they go and they make a play and you're in a situation where all of a sudden, you are going to go for it. It's third and long, and teams don't want to throw the football against Notre Dame on third and long in general. Even if you had if you had Caleb Williams, you don't want to throw on third and long against Notre Dame. That's why so many of these teams, you see them check to runs, and they're trying to get into situations where, hey, maybe we can get a manageable fourth down. But Notre Dame's defense has been pretty awesome on fourth down as well, right? So that's one of the things that makes it really, really difficult against them. And I just want to mention this too, because I really think Golden, he's really kind of an X factor in this game for Notre Dame, because obviously if you just put, Jimmy's versus Joe's, Notre Dame obviously has a lot of good guys on their defense, but they can't match just physically across the board with Georgia up front specifically. So can they get enough stuff? Can they create enough stuff where they get the negative plays and get in those situations? That's going to be huge for Notre Dame to do. And then once they're there, he has just been masterful against quarterbacks and just making them, taking away their first read, getting rid of even if they find something within a game, that stuff gets taken away again. It's just gone later on. That is not there for you later. And that's just kind of been the thing. And he always finds a pulse, whether or not it's hey, we're going to blitz you relentlessly, or, hey, we're going to go back and play coverage and you're going to think too much and whatever. He just is able to kind of find that. And that's also too why he deserves the Broyles Award, because he's just one of these guys who's so good, not just in preparation, but in game. But I wanted to mention this because I put it in the scouting report. Go to Irish Sports Daily, read the scouting report that I wrote on Georgia. It's super freaking long, but it's worth the read. You should check it out. So this is Al Golden last two seasons for kind of new starting quarterbacks, not just they're playing a backup, new starting quarterback. guys with less than 10 career starts. 49.6% completions, 5.4 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns versus 12 picks, and 49.6 NFL passer rating.
Yeah.
So
He doesn't mess
guys
with
have
them. Yeah.
zero guys have done well against them.
Yeah.
Like they're all just doing crap. So if Georgia wins this game, chances are it's not going to be because of Gunnar Stockton passing. That's just kind of what it is.
All right, let's flip the ball. Let's look at Notre Dame's offense against Georgia's defense. This is, I think, going to be a key matchup, and that's Notre Dame's running game versus Georgia's run defense. When I look at their run defense, at times this is a very, very stout team. And Jamie, as you mentioned in your preview, you look at their defensive tackles, and it's 310, 315. These are big dudes that they're going against, and so, this is a team that has the ability to stuff the run at times, and they've got some veteran players. Smell Mondone is a really very good linebacker. They've been a very effective team at times stopping the run, but then you have a team like Georgia Tech just run all over them. And there's been other teams that have had the ability to run on this team, and it's been kind of surprising because that's kind of what Georgia's been known for, is just having this fierce defense you can't run on, and then once you're in 3rd and long, they pin their ears back and they come after you. The inconsistency, I think, is what is surprising to me with this team. Now, when you look at the situation, Notre Dame's been able to run on most teams, but I don't think that they've played too many teams that have this kind of beef up front and this kind of talent up front. Yeah, I think Indiana was a pretty good, test for them, because I think Indiana was pretty stout against the run, better than a lot of people thought. But, as people talked about, minus the 98-yard run, there wasn't a lot of success in Notre Dame's run game. They hit some big plays. They did hit a few, explosives, but it wasn't a consistent thing. And in this game, I think if Notre Dame can run the ball, they have a great shot to win. But what do you think of this matchup, Yama? These two, Notre Dame's offensive line versus Georgia's front seven trying to run the football.
Yeah, I mean, it's their interior guys, specifically like their nose, the guys who played nose, and for them are really good players. And when they're playing at their best, those guys can be dominant, and they did play that way in both Texas games. That was something that really stood out. So I got to be honest, I don't really like Warren Brinson versus Pat Coogan. I think that's a pretty big advantage for Georgia, right? I think if that guy's playing at his best and Coogan's playing at his best, Brinson's best is better than Coogan's best. I don't even think that's an opinion. I think that's kind of fact. So I think Notre Dame's interior guys are going to be in a battle the whole game, right?
Well, especially if Rocco's banged up. If Rocco's banged up, I expect a whole lot of stunts. They're going to be sending Smale Mondone. They're going to try and do everything they can to take advantage of Rocco's, ankle, and then of course the issues that Coogan has. I mean, I think that that's what they'll do. Sorry to interrupt, but I think that that's what you'll see. Go ahead.
No, definitely, and I think that's one of the things to watch about. And you can't really the perimeter kind of screen game and all that kind of stuff. Even just things like Price and Love bouncing it, they might get it because those guys are exceptional, but it's going to be tougher to, get the corner when you have someone like Malachi Starks and some of these other guys chasing it down. They have more speed, specifically at safety. They got a lot of just fast, aggressive guys there that are playing good downhill. They're good downhill run defenders. In saying that, their corners, I don't think are very good. Their corners aren't good tacklers. So if you can get these guys into those situations where those corners have to tackle, that's a different story. If you can get situations where you're probably going to have to scheme some stuff up, I think they're going to probably have to you're going to have to hit some things where you influence influence block some things and maybe try to hit something quick, whatever. They're going to have to do some of that too, just to kind of make them think a bit, get their line thinking a little bit much, maybe catch them. If you get a beat on what they're doing in terms of some of their shifts, they do a lot of stemming and stuff up front. That's something big. But I think just straight up like Notre Dame running right at them, I don't think that's like a definitely. I can't see Notre Dame having a ton of success doing that, running like inside zone all day. But you look at like they rotate a lot. I don't think the guys who are their number 2 edges, those guys are pass rushers. They're not good versus the run. There's a big drop off between like Michael Williams and Damon Wilson, who is a freak athlete and a really, you see flashes of him as a pass rusher that are, devastating, but he's not a great player versus the run. And they have a couple guys like that I think, you can kind of beat in the run game, where I think you're going to see like Notre Dame's tight ends, I think will kind of be able to move some of these guys off the ball. A little bit tougher when it's going to be Michael Williams and some of these other guys. But Chaz Chambliss too is another guy who's like, he's 6'2", 250. So you think, oh, he's not a typical Georgia guy. The guy plays like he's 290. He gets after it, right? So it's a different story. So it's about when you run, taking advantage of those guys, of those personnel matchups. It's about, scheming things up and calling things at the right time. And Riley Leonard is going to be huge in this game. They've given up a ton in the quarterback run game. You're not going to see what Georgia Tech did in terms of like, Mike Demark mentioned, you're not going to see quarterback power. That's not something that Notre Dame does. And you don't want to do that because you're going to run quarterback power all day. I mean, I guess with Georgia Tech, they could do it because they didn't have to play the ACC championship game next week, but they just let it all out for Haynes King there. But I guarantee he was not walking well after that game. He got beat up, right? So, but I think what you can see, and I'm going to write something about this before the game too, is that what they, Jalen Milroe, some of the stuff there that they did with the couple of just like quarterback sweep stuff where they got them, just like some good scheme stuff. Zone read, obviously, that's going to be big. Some of that stuff there, I think you're going to have to get from there. And then also too, scrambling. They don't normally spy. Maybe they will this game because they just decide like, hey, we feel like we can win matchup wise with Notre Dame receivers, but they don't normally spy. So there's going to be opportunities there. I wouldn't be surprised if like a good chunk of Notre Dame's rushing yards came on scrambles from Leonard. Yeah.
Mitch Evans needs to play better than he did against Indiana in the blocking in order for them to have success. I did not think he blocked well in that game. I think Eli's a better blocker. He just is right now. And I found it interesting that Eli played, after Mitch missed a couple blocks and pretty much played the rest of the game. So hopefully they get that together, because I think those two guys are going to be very critical to Notre Dame's success. We know Notre Dame loves to run behind Anthony Knapp, and we see why in the many runs. And I mean, folks, this is just insane that you run behind a true freshman. It's just insane that happens, but that's where Notre Dame chooses to run a lot of the time. And so, tight end blocking is going to be key. Greg, flip this to you. Pass rush, it's interesting because you look at their edges, and Chaz Chambliss, Michael Williams, these are guys that were very, very high, guys that people were after and wanted, and then you look at Jalen Walker. This is these are some freak athlete type guys, but I wouldn't say their pass rush has just been the overwhelming pass rush that we've seen from Georgia in the past. They don't get home as much as you think that they would. Do you think Notre Dame can handle this group? Because athletically, these are guys that the NFL are going to want. They're guys that have first-round potential. It's tough for guys like Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner to handle some of these guys. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think the key for Notre Dame is, the context in which they're trying to throw. If Georgia knows you're passing and they can, it's second and long a ton, third and long a ton, and they know you're passing, that is a much different animal than say you're sitting there at 3rd and 3 or 2nd and 4 or whatever it might be, right? Like then it's different because then it's like, okay, we can't just pin our ears back. I feel like Georgia, whenever I watch them this year, it's like when they know you're passing the ball, that's when it's like, this is kind of scary, right? With Jalen Walker and Mikael Williams and those guys. Like that's the part where it just kind of gets like, you don't want it to be where they know that you're throwing the ball and they can just pin their ears because that's what they want to do. And so like, I think that mixing it up with Notre Dame and like, I could see a situation where Notre Dame is passing the ball and you're not really thinking about the context of it. And you're thinking, oh, they're doing pretty well. And then if it gets to the point where it's like Notre Dame continuously has to like drop back over and over again, that's when you're going to have problems. And like the Texas A&M game is kind of a good example of that, where I think they held up in the passing game, but Notre Dame never got to that point where it was like they have to be throwing the ball on a down-to-down basis. Like that is the biggest key because
can't get behind early. Yes.
Yeah, like I think it's kind of the key to like their whole season, right? In terms of, I don't want to say protecting those guys, but giving them the best situation possible to be pass blocking, right? And obviously, you're not facing teams the caliber of Georgia over and over again. So that's a key to this. I do wonder, like, and I think about, Tommy Rees was very good at this in 2022, especially when it was like he would come up with little wrinkles in the running game. Obviously, you think of 2022 Clemson specifically because they were so good at changing formation and using motion to out leverage the defense and go unbalanced in certain kind of ways. Like I wonder if Denbrock is going to add some little wrinkles to this to give them a little bit of an advantage there, because man for man, I think Georgia is better up front. But if you can, I mean, look, we've seen, how many times have we seen this when Notre Dame plays like Navy or something, when it's like, oh, they came out with something like we haven't seen and we haven't practiced, and you make Georgia adjust to that, make them make an adjustment to your running game, because it doesn't take many, as we've seen, to get a crease with Jeremiah Love, to get a crease with Jadarian Price. I think if you can kind of steal points early in the game before Georgia's been able to adjust, like that can be the difference in winning and losing, because then you can play the game a certain kind of way. And I feel like that's such a big part of this whole game, is which team is able to play the game the way that they want, that is able to control the action. I mean, even one score up is a huge, like 7 up is so much different in my opinion than 7 down. Like you just don't want to be chasing a team like this. And I think that is just kind of like a key to the whole thing, right? And so like what Denbrock does to keep Georgia off balance is kind of something to be monitoring throughout like just the whole game.
Yama, what do you think what are you most concerned about? Their outside pass rush, or are you more concerned about the games they'll play up front to try and confuse and take advantage of like a Coogan Rocco situation? Because, Rocco has been actually pretty good in pass protection. He's always going to have his limitations, but it's always been kind of speed and agility that has made it difficult for him as a pass rusher. And I know that he will probably play, but that doesn't mean he's healthy. And so, which are you more kind of concerned with here?
I think I'm the edge rushers definitely, just because I just think that they have so many. They have so many guys that can just win a one-on-one that more than any team that Notre Dame has played all year. So that's just something that, you're just going to always have to deal with. And I think that when you do that, you limit, you're going to have to get the ball out quickly. You're going to have to run stuff that you don't want to do. And like you want to be able, if it's 3rd and 7, to drop back and like have time to read something, let a play develop, try to hit an intermediate throw. You might not have that time. Right? You might not have that time. So, I mean, obviously too, they got like their linebackers are good blitzers too. Like they just have so much speed, right? Their safeties and that is something that I think it's going to be third and long is going to be death against them. It's really just going to be something that, Texas was just absolutely in jail every time they were in third and long against them. The one kind of hope is that something like, Leonard can escape the rush, maybe create something else outside of the framework of the play that I think, you might be able to get, whether that's a scramble or finding someone downfield. But a lot of that is going to be, it's just going to be tough against them. They're just so good and so athletic, and they just are going to send pass rushers in waves. I think really the big key for Notre Dame in the passing game is like I said, their corners are not great. They're also like not deep at all. Like Julian Humphrey, he was out after before the SEC championship game. He jumped in the portal. He started for most of the year. He was kind of splitting with Daniel Harris at the one spot. And, if now they only play those two corners all the time. So they're in a similar situation as Notre Dame, except for their guys aren't as good as Notre Dame's. They're not. Like they just aren't. Because I think we can say everyone can talk about, well, Christian Gray, this. Yeah, they are going to go after Christian Gray, but you can go after these guys. Like you can test them. You can certainly test them. I think that is something that you got to be willing to do it. Cause I think like Daniel Harris, he's 6'3", 195. He's big, he's long. Guy played a bunch of years. He's got 3.5 havoc plays.
Yeah.
All year.
Yeah.
Like they are horrible at ball production. Like I'm almost shocked at how bad they are at ball production and not being able to make plays on the football with that pass rush. Like, shouldn't it lend to like a lot of bad throws or whatever? Like
you would think so, yeah.
Yeah, but Daniel Harris, he's gotten cooked a bunch of times this year on the deep ball. I think Dalen Everett he's a good corner. He's a good corner, but he's also missed a ton of tackles, after the catch. So that's a guy too that you want to test too. I don't think either of the guys they play at nickel are great. They're not great, and they would prefer to play another linebacker there, which kind of says it all. So that's why I think you're going to see Notre Dame play a lot of 11 personnel and make them get that, nickel out there and try to do that as much as possible, because that can be a spot to win. I also think too, like there are opportunities. It's going to be about like, can Notre Dame's protection hold up enough against the pass rush for them to exploit some of these matchups? Because I mentioned those corners, I mentioned the nickel. I just don't think those guys are great. I mean, I would say even Malachi Starks, he's a great player. Don't get me wrong. He's a great player, but you get him isolated in a spot where he's against a smaller, quicker slot. That's a chance you can win. Like even just like a thing where it's just like, you might think Jaden Harrison versus Jaden Harrison's not going to be drafted and Malachi Starks is going to be a first-round pick. Get those guys in a matchup. That is a matchup that I think Notre Dame has a chance to win. Like he has struggled against guys like that. Against matchup on a tight end, he's a lot better, right?
Oh, yeah,
so
sure.
That's just like one of those things. Their backers, who I think like Allen is a good player, very good inside run defender. I mean, he got beat. He's been beat a bunch of times. He's not great in space, right? So can Mike Denbrock get enough of these matchups and win these matchups when they get them? Because I think that's kind of been the thing with Notre Dame and all of these games where it's like, man, you're like, Notre Dame, they're not doing this or that. Then they get enough. They get enough to create those opportunities, those explosive plays. They probably need a little bit. They're going to need a little bit more than just the one that they had against Indiana. I'm positive in this game, but if they can get 4 in that game, that might be enough to get them points and win the game.
Well, I think that's Indiana's was better in that regard though too, and kind of stopping explosive. That's what they were very good at. Special teams has been a lot of boom and also a lot of bust. Is this something that concerns you? Because it looks like Jeter's back and can kick the ball like you'd like, but I don't even know how many blocked field goals they've had. It all seems kind of low trajectory, coming off the foot low. That seems to be the problem. Rendell, I don't even know what to say about him as a punter. I've never seen a punter who doesn't follow through with his kicking motion. Unless he's trying to really pooch punt, but he'll do that from his own 10-yard line. And I just, it has been frustrating to watch special teams because they've done so much good, and they've been an impact on so many games positively, but they've also been an impact negatively. And this is a type of game that's going to be close, and that's a concern of mine. Greg, your thoughts here? Are you concerned?
Yeah, big time. I mean, Peyton Woodring is a good kicker for Georgia. He's 20 of 22 kicking this year. He's 3 of 5 from 50 plus. So that's basically where it is. He's missed 2 field goals beyond 50 yards. Everything else, he's 5 of 5, 40 to 49, 7 of 7, 30 to 39. Like, he's been a good kicker. He's someone that they can rely on. Like, even if you figure Mitch Jeter is back or whatever you want to say, which I don't think he is, but like, even if you say that, like, you just can't really count on them. Like, I think a huge part of the Texas A&M game was the fact that he was able to go 3 for 3. And the other part is, like you said, it's going to be a close game. Georgia doesn't have to drive the ball as far to get points than I think Notre Dame does. Like, if Notre Dame's kicking a 47-yard field goal, like, to the 30, like, are they really comfortable doing that? Are they comfortable? Like, are you going to say, like, okay, it's 4th and 4 at the 30, is Notre Dame going to try to go for it? Like, they'll probably go for it in that situation. Whereas Georgia, they might feel more comfortable kicking the ball. And again, in a game where points are probably going to be at a premium, right? You got to like Georgia in that situation. Now, on the flip side of that, like, Georgia's punter is out. He is hurt. Their normal punter is hurt. I would not want to have a backup punter against Notre Dame's punt coverage team in terms of how they can block it, how they can bring pressure. And the fact that they bring pressure mentally for the punter speeds up everything, right? It's one thing if you're a backup and you know the other team isn't really the type of team that's going to bring players. Notre Dame brings guys all the time. Then that's one thing. So I would be concerned about that. I'm not super concerned about Rendell, just in the case of, like, either he kicks it well or he doesn't. Like, it's just one of those things. I think being in a dome kind of helps. It just, like, you take out the elements. Like, I think that helps him. The other part of this is, like, Notre Dame's going to fake something in this game. They absolutely are. There's no way they're not. They are going to execute some kind of a fake. Does it work? Does it not? I don't know. Georgia's another team that might try to steal some kind of possession. Like, Kirby Smart is this way. They did it with Justin Fields against Alabama a long time ago. They faked a punt against Texas in the SEC title game when they had to move the ball. Like, if they are bogged down, they're going to fake something to try to get something going. So, like, the kind of the chess match between the two, kind of special teams coordinators is going to be interesting. But on the whole, like, you got to feel better about Georgia's because of their kicker. Like,
yeah,
they can count on him in a way that I don't know that Notre Dame can count on their guy. And it's a big deal when I'm going to pick the game to be like 20-17 or something. It's a big deal.
The layoff, Georgia has the longer layoff compared to Notre Dame. Who do you think has an advantage of this? We've seen at times where, especially if you're banged up, you don't want to hit. You don't want to hit in practice. You don't want to cause people to, get injuries that you're going to need them through the game. So you have to be somewhat cautious when you have 2 or 3 weeks of practice that, you're out there banging your guys around and stuff. That can affect tackling when you're not out there hitting as much. And, I think it helped Notre Dame in that they had the week off before the Indiana game, if nothing else, to heal, right? And I think it's going to help for Gunnar Stockton, because if he had to play the next week, I don't think he would have played. I think he was concussed at the end of the game. And so that certainly helped him in that he was able to, get his head together. We'd assume by now. Yama, do you see an advantage either way for either of these teams because of the layoff and how this is all unfolded?
I didn't think about that. It's a good point, Mike, about that part about, how much they're ramping up the intensity with their practicing. That could be something. And yeah, obviously it's not something that's being like, it's out there in terms of people talking about the concussion, but it happened. And, we heard from a reliable source, he missed practice. So that's something that even when you're thinking about, like, when people are talking about, well, Stockton in the run game, it's like, are they going to want to run him as much if he's not, that's something to think about. But I would tend to think, because Georgia has been in so many of these situations where they've had layoffs, that they know how to ramp it up and get ready and play for these games. So I don't think it'll be a big deal. As in terms of an adjustment for them. They are a very physical team. Like that's not something that I don't think they've lost games. Maybe the Ole Miss game was like probably the only game where you're like, man, they really like got out physical in that game. But that's the thing with Notre Dame, is that like Notre Dame, basically since NIU, that was the one thing that you'd say that NIU was like, and they were more physical than Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason they won the game. And
I think tackling is the issue more than anything. If you're not being physical in practice and you're not used to tackling, and as you pointed out, they haven't been a great tackling team on the perimeter anyway. So, does that make a bit of difference? Last topic on the game. How much, and I want both your opinions. We'll start with you, Greg. How much do you think that Notre Dame's consistency over the season, meaning they've been a very consistent team, they haven't been a lot of up and down, there hasn't been a lot of question marks about whether they're going to show up ready to play, they haven't had to come from behind a tremendous amount because they've just played well most of these games. How much do you think that helps Notre Dame, and then versus Georgia's inconsistency? We've seen Georgia play very well at times. We've seen them play very weak at times. What scares me about Georgia is we've seen them play 3 quarters of crap football, but in the fourth show up and just look like the team that is the number 1 team in the country. And that inconsistency worries you a little bit because they can turn it up a level that I'm not sure Notre Dame can really turn it up much more than how consistent they've been. So start with you, Greg. I mean, does this concern you? To me, I think it gives Notre Dame an advantage in that Georgia's going to have to play to beat Notre Dame. You're going to have to be a pretty consistent team throughout the game. And I'm not sure that they can do that, but I do think that they can turn up a level that I don't think Notre Dame can. Your thoughts here?
So I think it matters that Notre Dame, since NIU, has not looked bad in a football game since then. And Georgia has a couple of times. And I think
probably more.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But
4 or 5 times. Yeah.
Right. So I think it matters. Even the players, they know, right? Players know, like, we know what our level is. Like, we know we're good. We know we've played because we've played this way over and over again, right? And people can point, again, people like it's one of those things where it's like a conversation on Twitter where it's like, or online or on the web, on our message board or whatever it might be, where it's like, they're trying to convince us of whether or not Notre Dame is good because of the NIU thing. And to me, I've always said, like, look, I said it a bunch, like this team is different, and the team itself knows it's different. And the team itself also knows that they've watched people pay attention to college football. They've watched Georgia not look good a bunch, right? And they kind of know, like, they can be gotten. I think Notre Dame knows Georgia can be gotten. And another thing is, I bet you Georgia knows they can be gotten too. And that's another part of this. And I think, getting back to what you just talked about with the layoff and everything, it's interesting to me, and it's kind of like a fascinating subplot to this, where every time we've had the playoffs previous to this is everyone was always on equal footing, right? Whereas if the two semifinal teams were going to play, they both had basically the same amount of layoff, right? Where it was like 3 weeks, and everyone knew who the opponent was, and everyone knew they were preparing for the same thing, and everyone always had the same kind of layoff thing. Whereas Notre Dame, and not just Notre Dame, like this exists in the other games as well, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. Whereas like Notre Dame's now played a game in the playoffs. They've entered the frenzy of it, and they've met that kind of intensity of the playoffs, and now they get to play a team that hasn't yet. They haven't been in that, and they are entering it for the first time. And I'm just curious if there's like just a little bit of edge to the teams that have already played, if they come out like just a little bit better in that first quarter, and how that will kind of play a role in this. I don't know that it'll be the case. I don't know if that will be something that will play out at all, but it's just something that I think is interesting, like kind of a subplot to the whole kind of setup of the college football playoff this year. But to your point, I do think the fact that Notre Dame hasn't looked bad for 11 games now, right? 12 games now. And the fact that Georgia kind of has, they've looked beatable. Like Jamie said, 4 or 5 times this year, they've looked like a team that was getting ready to get beat. And so I think that's a big factor. And by the way, this is the most Notre Dame football we've ever gotten in a season. This is their 14th game. We've never gotten this much Notre Dame football before.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with anything. I just think that's kind of cool.
I think it's fun is what it is.
Yeah.
Yama, your thoughts here, buddy?
While I do think that there is something to the fact that Georgia hasn't played at a sustained level of excellence all year, and I think it just frankly means they're not as good as they have been. That's just kind of what it is. I don't even think it's like a, hey, they didn't come to play or whatever. I just think it's, you look at it, look at the teams, the national championship teams. Where are the question marks on those teams? There's like none. You know, they were loaded at every spot. And even, you know, when they had maybe like some small things at receiver, if you look back at it, you're like, oh, well, they had McConkey, and then they had Bowers, and then George Pickens comes back. And, you know, the first year they had Jermaine Burton. Like, no, they were loaded. Like, it's different where you've seen a full year of like, they got questions at receiver. They got questions at offensive tackle. They got questions at corner. You know, they have questions at quarterback now because of, you know, they're playing their backup. So to me, it's not about like whether or not like Georgia, you know, they're going to be like bring the right intensity to this game or whatever, because I'm sure they are going to bring a total intensity to this game because they did against Texas, right? The problem with Texas is Texas couldn't beat them, couldn't exploit the problems that they had. And Georgia elevated their game against Texas for sure. They played their best games against Texas this year, specifically on defense. Yeah, they turned the ball over and they just, you know, dominated them in that way. So, I mean, if Notre Dame loses a turnover battle, they have a zero chance, obviously, of winning the game. But but if Notre Dame wins the turnover battle, like I think Georgia's going to have a tough time winning the game. Like I think it could go either way. I just think that the reason that Georgia is so hot and cold is just they're not as good this year. Like they can be. So it's either going to be like, man, Notre Dame's defensive tackles couldn't hold up against their guards and center and whatever, and they just couldn't do that. They ran the ball on him, and they, you know, got what they needed to. And Stockton was like played above what you thought he was going to be, and that's how they like score enough points on offense. Or their defense turns the ball over and just was like, Notre Dame couldn't get anything going the whole time. They're in third and long, stuck in third and long for forever and whatever. Or Notre Dame's like, you know, they got those matchups that they wanted and they won it. Love did break that long one and you know, got that touchdown. Price did this, whatever. Denbrock did come up with that perfect call at the right time to get them there. And I think ultimately that's why I really see this game as really kind of a toss-up because I just see so many different ways it could go, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I would say too, and I mean, feel like we bring this up all the time, but it's true. You kind of have to bring it up. Like, if Notre Dame had all their dudes up front on defense, I would 100% be picking Notre Dame to win this game.
Oh, there's no question.
Like, it would be
too.
like, without a doubt. I think
Yeah.
I'd be like, Notre Dame's winning this game. Like, I just don't see with Georgia's backup quarterback, right? Maybe if Beck was playing, maybe I'd see it different, whatever. But there's all these other factors that are like, you know, flaws with Notre Dame, flaws with Georgia, and that's what makes it so interesting.
I think it's going to be an A&M type of game in the end. You know, I think Notre Dame's it's going to be a grinder. The fans are going to be on pins and needles the entire game. I think what needs to happen in this game is what happened in the A&M game, and then it's also what happened in the Indiana game. They need the J.D. Price and the Texas A&M big game, you know, big run. They need the Jeremiah Love big run in the Indiana game. They need something early in the game for them to get the momentum and get things going. And so it's going to be important for Notre Dame to make one of those big plays early, I think, to kind of get on top and put some pressure to Georgia. And so, again, I think that's what we're going to see. Probably, 20-17, 20-14 type of matchup when it's all said and done. And the one thing I will say is I think Notre Dame, they kind of remind me of Michigan last year in that I don't think Notre Dame's as good as Michigan was last year. But what I think the best thing about Michigan last year was they were such a consistent team. I mean, they just were very consistent the entire time. They were not a team that just dominated anybody, but they never got dominated on defense. And they were very, very consistent throughout the year. And that's what I like about Notre Dame heading into this game is how consistent they've been. And so, I don't know. Any final thoughts from you guys? Greg, start with you, and then Jamie with you.
I mean, it's going to be a battle. I mean, it's going to be close. I don't see either team pulling away at any point, and it's just going to be one of those games that you get into on a run to a possible championship. It's going to be stressful. Like there's going to be frustrating moments. It's going to look bad at points. It's going to look good at points. It's college football at the highest level that Notre Dame's trying to play at. It's the first of 3 games that they're going to have to win against teams that, I think Penn State's going to beat Boise State. So it's the first of 3 games that Notre Dame has to win to be national champions, that any of those individual matchups could be a championship game. Right.
Yep.
And that's what they've got to do. And that's what it is. And so, look, it's good that Notre Dame's in the game. I think it's awesome. I think it's great that I think the season came down to having to beat Georgia, to advance, and then having to beat Penn State and or Oregon and Ohio State, something like that, or Texas, whoever it might be. I think that's great, and it's something very cool. Like I said, the most Notre Dame games we've ever gotten in a season, for the 14th game.
Final thoughts from you, Jamie?
Yeah, I just think it's great to see that. Yeah, Notre Dame earn their way onto the stage, like Greg said. I think that's awesome. I'm really, really excited for the game. Yeah, and SCFB heard said, I mean, Boise and ASU, they might win. There's a chance they could win one game. They ain't making it to the final. They're not making it past the next. They're not. It's just they don't have the horses. I think that in this game, I think it's going to come down to like just big plays, whether that's explosive plays on offense, like a pick 6 on defense, a forced fumble in like deep in someone's territory, a big block kick or something like that. By the way, that is something that I just to reiterate what Greg said about the punting thing, like that could be something that's big. Like whether say Georgia goes for a fake punt and they get it, or Notre Dame blocks the punt, that's the kind of thing that could swing a game, right? Like, so I think it's going to come down to that kind of thing. And usually when it's that kind of thing, it's going to be a good football game. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch it.
All right, folks, that's going to be it for the show today. Once again, if you're not a member of Irish Sports Daily, go to the front page, click on the premium section, and sign up for our premium content. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the game before Wednesday. And, of course, there's lots going on with recruiting and the portal, and looking forward to the future. Also, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Irish Sports Daily on YouTube. Subscribe, like the videos, and it'll alert you when the next ones are popping up. So thanks for watching and listening. We'll talk to you next week, hopefully after a big win over Georgia and they keep marching on in the playoff. Thanks.